Nice to be here in Winnipeg again.
Yeah, Matt, nice to have you come back to Winnipeg for a visit here and bring Berg along and Desta, and we catch up on business and catch up on UFOs. So we're gonna have a couple of discussions about different stuff you want to talk about, and
UFO.
I'll bring you up to speed, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you've been doing. I hear you got a business going for the paranormal field where, and I've noticed this in the field, that you really can't buy paranormal paraphernalia, like if you're into Sasquatches or if you're into Skinwalker Ranch, and so you got
good UFO posters if you want one. It's hard to find.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what we did, we set up a store.
Yeah.
Doing some really neat UFO art, flying saucers, Bigfoot, Squatches.
Yeah, and most people don't. Well, some people know that you're the guy that does all the book covers.
Yes.
And you get all these people say, "Man, that guy's does these beautiful book covers." And so we always call you Matt the Pond guy because we really don't want to expose who you actually
That's
are.
right. I got to stay on the down low.
Stay on the down low.
Yeah, hide my basement.
And you're talking about doing documentaries. So you and I may be doing a couple little documentaries or something on Canadian stuff. And
absolutely.
You're a documentary film producer, and you're the artistic guy. And Desta is the one that makes everything happen and gets it up there.
Yeah, running behind the scenes.
So we're gonna be, from time to time, we're gonna run a little ad for paranormal stuff on your site that you got.
Mysteria Luna
on Etsy.
Yeah.
On Etsy, and so
we'll put the link on your Facebook page.
Yeah, and we'll put some of the different stuff up, whether it's Sasquatches or stuff that you have, and people may have ideas that they want stuff done.
Yeah, it's so easy to do that stuff too. We can do that custom.
For you, it's easy. For you, it's easy. For the rest of us,
we got mugs, T-shirts, hoodies, posters.
Cell phone cases.
Cell phone cases, yeah.
And that's because Desta was doing my editing of the books, and then she went to work for you in Ontario, and you're busy during the summer.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're doing ponds for the pond business, which is big in Ontario, and the big houses, the big money houses, and
lots of landscaping.
And then during the winter you have nothing to do, so
graphic
you start this up and do some book covers. And we got Sky Pilots. You did that cover. Got a lot of comments on the cover.
That was a nice cover
for Sky Pilots.
My own horn.
For UFO Sky Pilots. Yeah,
that's a nice cover.
Yeah, so that's the thing. People may want to come to for book covers.
We should do posters of that.
Yeah.
Nice big UFO Sky Pilots poster.
Yeah, we'll put it up there, and people. There's a lot of variety. You've got a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
not one or two designs, and you and Desta, but putting these designs together and putting them up. So that's exciting on your part. Where we get the message out, because we were talking just before, where the problem is that one of the things we have is that we're talking to the same people all the time. And we got to sort of expand the field to move it out and make it more commercial, where people will ask about what's this T-shirt, what's this about, or whatever. That we're talking to the same people all the time.
It's a conversation
We're not really getting anywhere with it. We get upset because people on the street don't believe it. How do they believe it? I mean, where are they going to find out about it? Because we never talk to them, so we have to try to sort of expand it. So I'm glad you're doing that. And so maybe we can talk about Sky Pilots. You want to?
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of the
craft.
I think it's one of the better books in terms of. Desta and I always talk about this. Which are the biggest books that people seem to pick up? And one was Managing Magic, which was the government cover-up aspect about how the government is bringing stuff out indirectly to the public. And then Contact Modalities was the biggest book, and that was the whole idea that there's a field and all the information is in the field, and you can use different modalities, whether it's hypnosis or regression or meditation or psychedelics, and you break through into that field, you bring material back. So we had that, and then the book I always liked best was Inspired, and Inspired goes into where does music songs come from, where does art come from, where does inventions come from, where do Nobel Prizes come from, and all this kind of stuff, where you start to realize these people are in the field, and they brought it back. Tesla with the the alternating current, that came in a download. The idea for the atom came in a download. Theory of relativity came in a download, and these kind of things that the Inspired. So this is another one that I think is a key book, because what it is the way I've put it up is, if you believe the world is a materialistic world, when you read this book, it just shatters that. There's no way if these people are telling the truth. And Gary Nolan, who you know, he's the geneticist out of Stanford University, who's doing the work on experiencers' brains and their DNA and stuff to see if there's these similarities and are the aliens programming DNA and all these kind of.
Is he doing these
theories.
studies on the antenna?
Yeah, and on the antenna, this idea that you have this thing in your brain that taps into the universe. So he said, one story is an anecdote, 2 stories is evidence. And I say we've got over 3 dozen people. And so I said 1 story is anecdotal, 2 is evidence, 3 dozen you better start investigating. Because you got 3 dozen people all telling this totally bizarre story that started in 2013 after I had the consciousness download and I sort of made the shift and went into consciousness. I had the woman, they set me up in Phoenix with this woman by the name of Pam Dupuis. And I was supposed to meet with her, and she's the first one that said to me, oh, I was flying the ship. And she was like in her 70s, and I'm looking at her like, are you insane? I was like, hey, crazy, like, come on, I'm not stupid. You think I'm going to believe this? And then I kept asking her, they let you fly the flying saucer? They let you fly it? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you fly a flying saucer? And she says, oh, you do with your mind. And so what Sky Pilot is suddenly all these people start coming to me. These weren't like people who were on the internet. These were people that sort of synchronistically started to come to me, and like even Desta. And I didn't know. I talked to Desta about this, and I didn't realize. And then it came to the point where she said, well, I had that experience too. And I said, you flew the craft too? And same as Chris Butzow. I'm talking to Chris Butzow, and he said, oh, I flew the craft. I said, you flew the craft too? And it was this synchronicity of people around me that had all had this experience of flying the UFO with their mind. And that's the whole thing. If this is true, that you fly this craft with your mind, forget about the material world. I mean, it's absolutely gone. That this whole thing is happening, and it all may be like this simulated universe, or the hologram, or the everything's a dream. This kind of thing where you can manipulate the world by doing this kind of stuff. Because the one guy in the book, this Ron Johnson guy, and that's where I say, if you believe in time and space, get ready to get rid of it, because Ron Johnson tells the story. And this guy's a Mormon, a strict Mormon, still follows his faith and whatever. He couldn't lie if his life depended on it. And he tells a story. He said, they asked me, where would you like to go? And he's sitting in this chair that's built for him. And he's got these sort of things on the end of the fingers, and he's got his fingers in there. And he said, where would you like to go? And he said, oh, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said, it's within you. Go within. He said this will take about 1 second. This is whole idea, this idea that I bring up in the book, that it may be all inside you. There's no out there. Like as John Wheeler said, there's no out there. It's all inside you. It's the universe is enfolded inside you. So Ron Johnson says, he said in 1 second, he said he looked out the window and there was the Milky Way off in the distance. Well, that's 50 to 70,000 light years away. I mean, if that's true, that they went that far in that amount of time, there's something wrong with the ideas of time and space.
Right, that's what we were talking about yesterday on the drive up, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the whole idea, the idea of consciousness, that consciousness is primary, that consciousness is critically important to this UFO thing, and that these people are all telling the same stories. And this is not, like, there are a lot of women. The one interview I'm doing tomorrow, that's the thing that impressed this guy. He said, there's so many women that flew the craft. And that's the thing that impressed me when this first woman told me. I thought to myself, this is crazy. I'm thinking Saudi Arabia. So immediately, as soon as she said it, I'm thinking Saudi Arabia. Like Saudi Arabian women at that point could not drive a car unless there was a man in the car with them. And I'm thinking, and they let you fly the craft. When these women can't drive a car, and you no license, no insurance, you just take the flight. Let's fly the craft, And it's like it didn't make any sense. And so that's where this it all sort of broke down. But it started to show another worldview that showed the world isn't the way you think it is. And that's why I thought this book was so important, the thing with the telepathy, where everybody described telepathy, where the being was talking to them telepathically, or the fact that when they put their hand on the panel, they could suddenly see in 360 degrees. I had never heard that before in my life. And I actually asked Ron Johnson again. I went to Ron and I said, did you actually, when you did this thing, when you had these out-of-body experiences, these events, did you actually see in 360 degrees? Because it's hard to imagine. How's that? And he said, yes, in this way and this way as well. 360 degrees around in all different directions. And he confirmed it. Yeah, he could. And then I realized that when he started looking, out-of-body experience people will say the same thing. I was out of my body, I could see in 360 degrees. And then you start to realize these people are telling the truth. They're actually telling something.
So it sounds like at first you were a little skeptical.
Oh,
and
absolutely
you started hearing
yeah.
stories, and then you were like, well, there's similarities in this case, there's
Yeah.
similarities in this case. Things I've never heard before. What were some of the more compelling things? Like, well, what changed your mind?
Well, the 360 degrees, because I've never heard that. The idea that you're interlocking. The other important part of it is that everybody, like Desta put her hand on sort of a ball type thing. People would describe, the one guy from Liverpool said there was a panel on the wall, and they were all doing this thing. They're flying, and he said, "Can I have a go at it? Can I have a go?" And they said, "Yeah." And so he put his hand on the panel. He said immediately he could see 360 degrees, and he just lifted it off 50 feet or 100 feet in the air, and then he brought it back down or whatever. So it was no big deal. But they all say the same thing: the craft is alive, and when you put your hand on it, you become one with the craft. And this is this whole oneness concept that's in all spiritual literature, this idea that everything is one, there's no division in everything, there's no me and you, we're all one thing, and we appear to be separate where we're not. So you put your hand out, you become one with the craft, and the craft is alive. So you hear all these debates now about artificial intelligence, and the whole idea is that
That's the AI trying to...
the AI trying to go get it, bite him, go bite him. So the whole idea of AI, so the idea we have now is that it's a random universe, and that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain. So the brain gets complex enough, like if you pile enough rocks, and you keep piling these rocks in a big pile, eventually the rocks are going to start talking, because it gets complex. And it's this idea that complexity in the brain gives rise to consciousness. So or even the biblical thing, God created the heaven and the earth, then he put consciousness into the human being later. And so that's the idea that we always have, is that consciousness is inside the human body, and that once we learn what consciousness is, we can take it out and put it into a machine and we can live forever. Right. So that's the idea of artificial intelligence. But what you're seeing with the UFO people, these 36 people describing, is what you see is artificial intelligence like 2,000 years ahead. Right. That it's biological, and that's the whole key, is the idea that the ship is biological. It's grown, it looks like it's metal, but it's actually grown, and it's actually, people will describe of interacting with the power supply in the ship, and that consciousness inside the ship is talking to all the ships in the universe. And this connectedness that in order for something to be conscious, it has to have biological element to it. So what you'll hear is, and starts making sense with what people will describe in terms of UFOs. They'll say the number one thing was always, I looked at it and it didn't have any rivets in it, and it didn't have any divisions in it. Like,
right, it was all seamless
and no rivets. And that's the whole idea, is you start to realize, oh, they're growing the thing, it's one thing. Or inside, what people will say, there's no 45-degree angles inside the ship. It's all like curved, and it's like it came out of a mold. There doesn't seem to be any sort of separation anywhere. It's almost like it's all one mold. That's the whole idea. It's all being grown by one thing. And then the other weird thing that people describe, and a number of people describe this, is they can make the ship as big as they want inside the ship. And the one guy who was the MUFON state director out of Japan even talked about this bizarre thing where the being was, they're talking about some information, and he went to get the information, and the wall was like a white wall like we have here, and he just went like this, and this book came out of the wall. And he opened up this book, and it came out of the wall. And people will describe that the ship, they can make it as big as they want. So then you start getting these stories, and we even got another one from Jacques Vallée that I just got last night. So Jacques Vallée is doing this interview with this woman, and he says, well, how big was the UFO? She said, oh, it's as big as the house. And then he said, okay, and she described it, and she's in the ship, and they showed her around. And then there was this giant staircase. She went up this giant staircase up to the top, and there was this big amphitheater. And she's looking at this big amphitheater, and then Jacques Vallée says, well, you said it was as big as your house, but that's bigger than your house. And that's all people describe that it's bigger on the inside than it is outside, like Chris Bledsoe said. And I think Chris Bledsoe actually said that he was inside, and he looked, and it was big, and they looked outside again, it was a little thing, and he looked inside, and it was huge. On the inside, and they can make it as big as they want. A guy from New Zealand, and this is not in the book, but the guy from New Zealand told me, Marco told me, that when he was in the ship, he looked this way, and he could not see the end of the ship. And he looked this way, and he could not see the end of the ship. And this is the whole idea, they can make the ship as big as they want. And that's what Pam Dupuis, start going back to what Pam Dupuis told me in 2013. She said, they can make the ship as big as they want. In fact, they have UFOs that are as big as the solar system. And it was like when I heard that, I went, yeah, okay, well, whatever. You flew the ship and now there's big, and it's like that totally doesn't make any sense. But now you're starting to think, hey, this could actually be possible. They could actually do this.
Well, there's a lot of stories about that. There's a lot of accounts of that, of people going into the ship and the ship's way bigger than it
yeah,
is.
and so that blows away. And even the one that I just got, Michael, what's his name? Schratt. Michael Schratt put out a video, and I should have known this because I knew Len Stringfield. Len Stringfield was a guy back in the 60s, 70s, 80s who had all these people coming to him talking about alien autopsies. And he was tracking all these alien autopsies. And I remember I went to the 1978 MUFON conference, which was in Dayton, Ohio. And that was the first time that anybody ever talked about down craft. You never heard about down craft or alien bodies and autopsies and stuff like this. And Len Stringfield was going to give the first lecture ever on this.
What year was that?
1978.
78.
And so he was there, and he lived in Ohio. So we went there, and then it was like I said, "Oh, I'm supposed to talk to Len Stringfield. Yeah, I got a meeting with him." And he said, "Oh, we've moved him. There was a death threat. We have moved him to another hotel." And this is the thing. It was like a big thing at the time. It was like, this guy's going to talk about autopsies and stuff like this. So Len Stringfield has this case where he talks about this photographer in Hawaii, 1973, who gets flown from Hawaii to Norton Air Force Base. Then they put him in a car, they drive him for 2 hours, and he comes to this sort of a hangar type thing. And he goes inside the hangar, and there's a big crane, and it's holding this UFO up, which is 30 feet across, and it's in a net, hanging from it's inside this net, and it's hanging from this crane. And it's kind of weird. And then there's a door opening, and he goes inside, and his job is to photograph the panels. So you'll see in UFO Sky Pilots, Chris Butzel actually drew the panel, because the panel will have all these different symbols on it. So Chris drew the symbols that he saw on the panel that was in his. This guy's job was to photograph all the panels inside of this thing, and all these symbols are on them. And I guess they're trying to decode the symbols as to what they meant and stuff like that. And then he said that it was, when he got inside the craft, he said it hit him that he could have taken a football. His description was he could have taken a football and thrown it as hard as he could at any direction and not hit a wall. It was that big on the inside. Wow. It was only 30 feet on the outside. So even when it's on the ground and it's been captured, it still has this thing. And so that's the whole thing that I think the Sky Pilot book is so important, is that if these stories are true, forget about reality. You think you've got it all figured out. And that's what Max Planck, if you remember Max Planck, the guy that was the father of quantum physics, when he was in 1874, his instructor was Joly, and Professor Joly was his mentor and stuff. And he said, don't go into physics. He said, you're wasting your time. You're not going to have anything to do. We've got it all figured out. This is 1874, and we've always think that we've got it all figured out. We've got one more piece to put in. And when you see Sky Pilot book, and these people, 36, it's not one or two, this is 36 people, they're all telling me. It's like a cue card. I remember the guy, we have all these high-level witnesses. So I've got this one guy, I was lecturing at UFO MUFON, Orange County. And I was talking about flying the ship. And then we went, they go to the restaurant after. So we're in the restaurant after, and all these people, they want to ask questions or whatever. All of a sudden this guy comes in the restaurant and they're, hey, David, hey, you should have been at Grant's lecture, man. He was talking about flying the ship. Tell him your story. And then this David guy comes walking and I said, you were flying the ship? He said, I think it was a dream. I said, everybody thinks it's a dream. I said, you had that dream of flying the ship? He said, yeah. And then they said, David, tell him what you do. And then I said, what? And he said, oh, I'm a pilot. I said, oh, my son's a pilot. My father's a pilot. I said, what are you flying? He's talking about this plane, and he says, F-16s. I go, you flew F-16s? And he goes, yeah, I'm a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. I said, sit down and tell me your dream. And it's almost like a cue card. You can take the cue card, and it's exactly the same story. They come on the ship, there's somebody behind them. They don't know if it's an intelligence behind them or if it's humans behind them. And they go in and standing in the middle of the ship, and they don't know what to do. And then the voice comes in from behind. There's two people behind them, and they say, go ahead and do it. And this David guy, that's what they said. Go ahead and do it. And he said, I don't know what to do. And they said, you know what to do, just do it. And then he walks over and there's this panel, and he puts his hands on this panel. And it's the same thing. It's, you become one with the craft. And he said, suddenly, I'm one with the craft. He said, the craft's alive, and I'm communicating. And whatever I'm thinking, that's what the craft is doing. And he said, I'm flying. It's just like flying an F-16, except he said it felt like suction cups on an F-16, whatever that means. And he said, I'm flying this thing. And he said, it was so weird. And so he takes his hand off. He's waiting for the thing to stall, and he's going to put his hand back down because the craft's going to stall. He takes it up, and he's still flying the craft, and he's flying away, and he takes the other one, but he only takes it up an inch off so he can put it back down. He's got his hands off. and he's flying the craft, and his hands are off the panel. And then I had a guy who was a former captain, 747 United Airlines captain. And so you got to be there forever at United Airlines to be that. And he had the dream twice. And the second time he had the dream, then Joe Burks said, "Hey, I think we better revert this. You better tell the story." And so I told him the story, and he said, "Well, I'll tell you the story. I mean, I can make it what you want." It was the same story. He's flying through the clouds.
I think that's the thing. You know, when you first hear about it, people flying the UFO, you're like, you know, but as you hear these stories and you hear the similarities,
Yeah.
and
Exactly the same.
and
Yeah.
you know, credible witnesses,
Yeah.
it starts to change things a little bit, and it gets pretty interesting.
Yeah, and then you got to say, like, what's really going on here? And that's what's always amazed me, because that's what happened to me when I first had the sighting, is when I saw the thing the second night, it was flying away, and I just thought to myself, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. It's like, and why is it in Carmen? Carmen's got nothing. It's this little place. So my whole life I was obsessed with this thing, like, I don't know what's going on, but somebody's got to know what's going on here. Somebody's got to know what this is. And then you start to get this idea, when these things get exposed, the world becomes so much more complex and so much less material. It becomes this idea of consciousness is connection. Because when I broke away in 2012, I had that download consciousness experience. A lot of people just dumped me in the UFO community. Like Cameron's lost it, and he's lost his marbles or whatever, and stuff like that. And now you start to see. You tell me now, read the UFO skypods and come back and tell me consciousness doesn't have anything to do with this. And people even know now, even if they don't know what it means, they use the word consciousness because it's a little buzzword. And they know that there's something to, but they're not really concerned about it. They're still into sightings and you know, what's the government doing and stuff like that. And one of the things that we can talk about in the second segment is this whole idea that I still maintain, and there's this big debate. What does the government know? And so Stephen Greer says, oh, they developed it in 1954, they're flying these things around. And then you have Jim Semivan who says, there does not even appear to be a there. And that's where I think they're at. They haven't got a clue. And that's, if you're familiar with the Wilson Leak document that I managed to get on the internet, at the end of that document it says, we have a craft and we think it'll fly. Now what does that mean? It means they got a craft, totally intact, and they can't fly it. They think it'll fly, but they haven't flown it. So why haven't they flown it? Because it needs a consciousness interface. You need somebody with consciousness, like your fingerprint on a cell phone, to turn it on in order to do it. So they've got this, and it's actually in this document that has been read into the Congress. This whole idea that they've got a craft and they think it'll fly.
You're gonna write a book about that too, right?
Yeah,
that's the next one.
Yeah, well, we're going to go into that's the important part to me, is that when you start looking at it, you start hearing these stories that Eric Davis told, and he's the one that gave me the Oak Shannon notes, and he's this sort of guy that if they were going to have a testimony, open hearing, that's the guy you want, because he knows exactly what's going on. He's talked to all these high level people, and I've lost my train of thought here. He's basically saying that in 1989, which mysteriously was the same year that Bob Lazar's story happened, they shut the program down and they put it on the shelf. And every 6 or 7 years, they take the program off the shelf and they take a look at it and say, we still can't figure it out, put it back on the shelf. And that's what I think this disclosure is about right now. They're trying to get out of the black world where everything is stovepiped, where you got a piece, I've got a piece, but I can't talk to you, can't talk to me, and this sort of stuff. And they put it into the white world, so all the scientists will start to put input, and it'll be like a big giant vacuum cleaner into the black world, all the material in there, and it's never going to come out. Because that's what people are doing with this disclosure thing. They're saying, oh, we're waiting for this disclosure, and I'm going, like, give your head a shake. I mean, what happened to the first one? The report that came out on this secret group, they said there's 144 sightings and one of them we've identified. And then they say, well, what's the shape? And they say, we can't tell you, it's classified. And they say, well, where's the report? Oh, it's classified, we can't tell you that. And I say, this is even worse than Blue Book. You talk about Blue Book was the scourge of the UFO world, this total scam thing that the US Air Force ran until 1969. This is worse, because in the Blue Book, at least you knew what the shape was, and you had the sighting. You don't even have that. They just say, and so now everybody's waiting for the second report, and there's these rumored things, there's 360 cases, and half of them have been identified. And it's like, well, what are the cases? And it's like you got these numbers, but you're getting nothing, absolutely nothing. It's all just going into the black world. And now the congressman may know, They may know what's going on. They've got a briefing and they know a little bit more what's going on. But the public is being told nothing. They're being told less than they were being told before. And everybody's cheering us on like, oh man, we got disclosure. This is exactly going
All
the
the
wrong.
information is filtered.
It's going the other way. There's no disclosure whatsoever. So
we should probably save this for the next segment. We're gonna get back to UFO sky pilots.
Okay.
I got some questions.
yeah, okay.
So was there any research that was ever done on any of these witnesses that were flying the crafts? Anything, any connections to any prominent figure scientists? Gary Nolan, was he looking into it at all?
No, this is the thing that this is sky pilots. Like as I said at the beginning, this isn't in any literature. You're not going to find this on the internet. These were people that came to me, almost like I was intended to have these people all come to me and tell me this. There is nothing on this whole deal of flying the craft. There was. I remember there was when the Free Foundation did their research. They did the 3,000 experiencers. Of the people who answered the question, 14% said that they flown the craft. And I remember when I started to get these cases, I went to somebody at Free and I said, hey, can we send out a survey to these 14% who've flown the craft and talk to them? And I was told, well, you know, lots of things happen inside the flying saucer. People experience a lot of stuff. I said, yeah, they may experience a lot of stuff, but when they start flying the craft, don't you think we should talk to them? I mean, because they're all telling the same, I knew already they were telling the same story. And that's the whole thing, is that nobody has investigated. This is totally new. And this is this consciousness thing. This absolutely confirms the fact that consciousness is absolutely critical to this whole thing, and that this hasn't been discussed. So this is the first, now it doesn't really matter. So if somebody comes on the street now and says, well, I flew the craft, it doesn't mean anything because the book is out. But before this, if you look on the internet, there's nothing about people flying the craft. It's unknown. Now it's open, which means that you can't really believe anything anybody tells, because they may just be copying my book.
Right.
But before that, there was nobody doing it, and that's why I think it was so important. It's the first time this has ever been discussed. And the 360 degree, the connection to the spirit world type thing. So you have the 360 degrees that people in out-of-body experience will report. And so when we were talking to a guy out of Liverpool, and he started talking about this, I go, this sounds familiar. He's talking about 360 degrees, it sounds familiar. And you start getting these things like, somebody else said that. And so we did that, and then you had the, no, I forgot what I was going to say there, but the key is that it's this consciousness thing, it's this connection. All this sacred literature, the mystical literature has talked about this connection, everything's one, and that you can go wherever you want, because people were being told in their head, it's within you. You've got to imagine where you want to go. They were told this clearly. You've got to imagine, and when you do that, you'll go there. It's all, and it's within you, and that's what Ron Johnson was told, and that's his whole idea. Or Ron Johnson said, another